Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, regardless of what time this lecture finds you. I hope it finds you well. For this week, we will be taking a step in another direction for week 3, module 3, to understand how to pick a topic and begin researching. What we will begin to develop is an annotated bibliography, or references, annotations, things like that. And the bibliography portion we will discuss in a moment. But the goal is to develop from a research process and then take notes to begin the framework for the rest of your writing. So we'll see something like, instead of picking a topic in our discussion, the goal will be to sort of look and do some research before we establish some research or inquiry-driven questions and narrow down our topic. So instead of having readings for this week, we'll be using these 2 exercise forms along with the Purdue Owl, which we always seem to use in one shape, form, or another, to develop these 2 assignments. The first being the APA citation assignment, and the second being an annotated bibliography. So the objectives for what we should be getting out of that is an analysis to analyze the writing of others for main points, themes, structure, audience, purpose, and context. That will occur through the actual annotation process, where you will not necessarily read all of each of the things that we're going to look at, but when you're doing your research, you'll look enough to at least make decisions about whether it's usable and valid for your research. You will learn to develop a focused topic based on writing context from a well-considered subject. And so for this particular assignment, we'll be picking the subject, which will be cows. I will mention that again throughout the lecture. But the goal will be to start to think about how cows, a very simple 4-letter word, with a very broad topic range, could become, or think of it as like a meta topic, could become a lot of research-driven or inquiry-driven questions that will help you facilitate a well-considered subject, right? You will learn to understand the different purposes writers may employ through looking at the different genres and artifacts that we will be annotating. You will see how credibility to an argument can be tied to elements including grammar, tone, and presentation, because you'll be doing that while you're evaluating other people's work, right? So when you start to do the research process, you start to say something like, this website or this book has a lot of misspelled errors. I'm not sure I would trust this person. So we'll be able to start to see how credibility develops from that. We'll be able to start producing academic writing through a considered process and understand each step along the way. So this is sort of like step number 1. This should be the very first thing we undertake. So if you think about, like last week, we discussed genre very vaguely. We will build on that this week as we start to annotate bibliographies. And then from a general education standpoint, so like if we're thinking about what we're learning, like what are we really getting from this, without just having someone ask you to repeat after me and I will tell you what to say and then you repeat it and I'll be like, oh, good, that's good, you're really learning. Instead of doing that, we will utilize written genres appropriate to the task. And so a lot of this is active learning, active thinking, active being critical of what you're engaging with. You'll express ideas clearly and compellingly in text because you will have to be able to take note of what you're understanding, and then effectively identify and address various audiences and context. As we sort of unpack the word cows and look through it and make our own annotated bibliography of that, and then even source it out for a citation or a reference page is what we call it in the APA, you will start to see that we will get context and audience out of those minor contacts you will make for your annotations. Obviously, this is the presentation you are looking at. So if you're clicked on this and you're already looking at it and you're talking to me, or at least listening to me talk to you, you'll realize that you're in the right presentation. As I said, there is no active reading for this week other than the 2 assignment pages and perhaps the Purdue Owl or the APA paper or APA website directly. But again, you can rely on the Purdue Owl to cover that. So the APA citation assignment, which is linked here and we will look at in a moment, and the annotated bibliography exercise are both due this coming Monday, February 13th by 6 p.m. This assignment will close on Wednesday, the 15th. So again, remember that, like, we've been kind of flexible, I think, on the introduction assignments and even this week 2 assignment where there's a little bit of flexibility. That flexibility will have to step away a little bit as we move into week 3 and we deal with these 2 assignments. And there's, I believe, 20 things that you'll have to look at, 10 on each one. it's not super complex, but it's complex enough that it deserves your attention. So make sure you're working on these things early and often. To look at the assignments, let's click on the APA citation page. You will see after reviewing this lecture, use the template and exercise example exercise form to create a reference page with the appropriate assigned topics and sources. That's one of the two assignments. We're going to go back and forth because I want to start with the annotated bibliography. It's more relevant and it will build into the other one. So you can even sort of use the same sources if you've got, well, we'll look at it in a minute, right? So for the annotated bib exercise, you will use the provided annotated bib exercise template. So there's a template. And then follow the instructions I'm providing during this lecture. There will be 10 points available for each of the 10 sources. And to get credit for a source, you must include a properly formatted APA citation. Remember, I told you that there's some duplicity here that works really well. Because if you're doing one, it intersects with the other. And so you can actually do two assignments at once, effectively, if you're planning ahead in your research. And then at least one direct quote from that reference. So let's have an actual look at what those look like. So I'm going to go here. Okay, so I said I want to look at the APA. Nope, this is the wrong one. I'm going to actually just close that right now because I made the prompt simpler for you. So this is the annotated bib template. If you're looking at my screen, you should be seeing something that has what I would ascribe as a relatively simple format. And I'm going to walk you through this. So you're going to put your name here, being straight. You're going to put the date, and it is 2/5/2023, and this is for English 101. So you'll see that it says annotated bib template here. But I told you I want you to talk about cows. So you might rename this something like cows, right? Just to start out, but I'm not going to make absolute changes. There we go. I don't want to make absolute changes because this is the template you're going to use as well. So when you see it, it will have what we had originally here, your name and things like that, right? So you'll see that for reference one, and I'm not referencing cows. I want you to do that. I'm not going to go and use samples that show you that. I'm going to use samples that are already sort of built in here so that you can see that, so that you can go out and find cows. I may even show you one way to look at that, but I'm assuming at this point, I don't think a Google search or even, and yes, you can use Google to do this type of a search initially. Google Scholar, you can look through databases. We'll talk about that briefly in a moment. I'll even walk you through what that might look like. So you'll see reference number one. What you will see on your format will not be my example here. You will have to put in your first one. For this particular sample, I used a book. The language, again, use the language that you understand. You'll see that I say Burke, and I do make this an appropriate APA citation, so it immediately gets an in-text citation to make my life easier in the long run. Posits, or in much more common language, suggests that scholars should be able to speak on a topic through their sources in a manner that allows all the voices of the sources to be valued regardless of who is reading, conversing, speaking with them in the philosophy of a literary form. That's how I understand something. It doesn't mean that you will understand it. Please don't worry about understanding exactly what I'm writing here. This is just a note like how I would write my own notes to myself, right? He is discussing literary forms of conversations as academic thinking through 3 points, and I identify these 3 points. And so when you see yours, what you should be thinking about is when you're looking at a book, you don't have to read the entirety of the book. You can, and I'm looking, do I have one that I can just grab here that might do it? This one probably does. Well, in a hardcover, I might have something like this in the back that tells me something that I can at least read. I might be able to go to the front, and again, this is if I have a hard copy book in my hand. I can go to the very front and read the introduction. So I'm not asking you to dive deep into cows. I'm asking you to start asking yourself questions like, well, what type of things might be interesting in books about cows? Think broadly. Think about the potential to discuss the dairy industry, to discuss the beef industry, to discuss butchers, to discuss the access of leather from cows in commercial products, to talk about land. You get where I'm going with this? Cows is a theme, or at least a topic, but you can dive in any way you want to go with it, but it must be in some way connected to cows. You could even talk about like yogurt if you wanted to, or the making of cheese if you're looking for a book on that. And remember that these don't all have to have the same connection. So as we're sort of looking through this, remember that what you're building is a reference catalog, an annotated bibliography of things that you've sourced, so that you can kind of develop research questions based off what you're able to find in the universe, if you will, right? So you'll see that, again, this will be something similar to what you would write in your own words. I want a quote. You have to have at least one quote. If you can pull a couple of them, you will find it more useful in the long run on this exercise. So I've actually taken a quote from Burke and I've put it in here, and I've cited it correctly. I made sure that it was a direct quote. This is kind of long, but it definitely works for our example. And I could put a second and third quote here. Once you've done a quote, your third paragraph, your third line, and for size purposes, I would suggest that this should be 100 to 150 words. This can be whatever length you need it to be. I wouldn't go as long as I did here, but my sample works. I could cut this at any point and make this into a sample. I could literally do it right here, throw in a quotation, delete the rest of this, and I would still have a quote that has legs enough to be useful later. We're not going to do that. I'm going to get rid of that. This last paragraph, this one right here, this is a useful reference for your research, my research, questions, or for my research topic, because it covers something related to cows and its connection through whatever questions you might be asking. Remember that at this stage, we haven't created sort of a locked-in topic other than cows. We haven't locked in research questions. So you have a lot of room to negotiate where you're going to go with that. You will see that there is reference to, and it looks like this. So yours will look like reference to. All 10 of yours will look like this when you open the citation page, which is that your APA citation will go here, which I told you was going to be easy enough if you're thinking ahead and working on these two assignments collectively, because you are allowed to use the references that you use for this in your APA citation page, your reference page, and vice versa. When we get there, you'll see the way to make that happen. You will see that the author, so there's a blank here, and you could say the author. So straight, 2023, states and forms, suggests, posits, fill in your verb, that type of thing, right? What are they saying? What are you reading? What are you understanding that website, that podcast, that newspaper, that magazine, that interview? You'll see that all these things are relevant to our conversation. What are they doing here? He, she, they are discussing whatever the 3 points are, a quote, and then useful, and again, and again, and again. Again, for yours, I will leave the sample in so you can kind of go back and remember what it is, but you should be replacing this with one of yours so that when you are completed with the annotated bib template, you have 10 total annotations with appropriate APA citations, references. So now, I've made a mention of that. Let's look at what that assignment looks like. And that assignment is right. Don't you like how I have to go hunt it down? Right here. Boom. Okay. So, very similar format. You'll put your name, you'll put the class, you'll put my name on here and the date. And some format of that. I don't care if it's the same on both. Have your name on there, obviously. But I'm not so worried about that as a format as much as filling out the form correctly. So, you will make an APA reference page sample of your annotated bibliography. But what you will do is, to make this work effectively, you will see that I have put in how to cite a song. So maybe there's a song. I don't know of one off the top of my head. I leave it to you guys to figure it out. I know of one. I'm not going to give it to you. So you'll pick a song. You will create an APA citation reference with it based off of the fact that I've given you the information for how to do a song. It's right here. Just follow the formula. If you look at the video, you'll see that I've given you a formula for a video. You will see that I've given you a formula for a book. And then I stop. You will have to find a magazine, an academic journal article, a newspaper article on cows, a website that discusses cows, an interview that connects cows to your topic, which is your cows, right? However you're framing out your questions, a movie, and a podcast. This sounds a lot more complicated than it is, but to find the ones that I have not cited here, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, your easiest bet would be to do a Purdue OWL APA citation for X. So you will see, as we sort of go back and forth, that magazine, so I could literally put magazine, and it's going to give me a site, and there it is, reference list for periodicals, which is a magazine, etc., etc. So this is the part where you're going to have to do the research, and you're going to have to familiarize yourself with these last parts. Not impossible. If you know what you're doing, once you find the source, if you're not sure, you can always backtrack and do Son of Citation Machine APA magazine. And it will take you to Citation Machine. This is where you kind of, if you think about like from an algebraic equation, when you're solving a math problem, the easiest way in algebra to know that you're doing it right is to reverse engineer the question. I don't know if you've been taught this, but it kind of works the same way in the way we source out a reference. So if we're not sure that the reference was done correctly, because again, Dr. Dean's throwing you to the wolves on the last 6, then you can always check, as I just said, by using Son of Citation Machine. I wouldn't start here, because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're better off sort of building up the skills to understand how this works, and then reverse engineer things to see if it matches up. And you'll see that a magazine's here. I could type in something like, I don't know, bicycling magazine, right? Something easy that I know of. Let's see. I'm not seeing the source for that. So let's go back this way. Try this one. Again, I'm just showing you how we can keep trying. And this is why you don't want to do it in reverse if you're seeing, because I don't have an idea of what we're looking for. But if I did, we'd be working in reverse of this, right? So I could go out, find a magazine through the other process, make sure that I'm citing it right, have my reference, and then cross-check it with this site. And that's why I'm not showing you how to do that, because I don't want you just to start here. I would like you to start from the way I originally showed you, which is the Purdue OWL. So I think that covers everything we need to deal with. Getting back to the module, those assignments the exercises themselves will be in a file right here called Annotated Bibliographies. I will be putting them in here after this lecture so that you have access to them. Now that we've used them as references, you should be set. Remember that there were 2 assignments. There is no active reading other than doing the research on the topic cows and finding some things that fit specifically your APA reference page, which means you can't just pick 10 books out of a Google search and move forward. You're going to have to do a little bit more legwork, a little bit more work, and find those ones that are specifically identified. I think that keeps everything clear. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Enjoy the week. Talk soon. Bye-bye.